President Trump is with the King of Jordan today, as the King clearly had concerns about vetting large numbers of Gazans. We'll discuss the U.S.'s vetting process and how it applies globally with Afghanistan. And we've got Navy veteran Sean VanDiver with us to break it all down. Plus, we've got Moms for Liberty leader Catalina Stubbe here to discuss education in a post-Department of Education America as orders to work alongside DOGE continue from President Trump. And Mayor Eric Adams can breathe a sigh of relief after GOJ prepares to drop all charges against him. All next on the Matt Gaetz Show. Let's do this. We're shaking up Washington, D.C. We're breaking the fever.
You ever watch this guy on television? It's like a machine. He's great. Matt Gaetz.
As Elon Musk and OpenAI Sam Altman engage in a war of words and threats to buy each other's companies, we turn our attention tonight to America's last war and the lasting consequences, Afghanistan. Once mighty Russia couldn't conquer and govern the hostile mountainous territory during the Cold War. America couldn't conquer and govern it during the global war on terror. Both empires found defeat along the Mujahideen and Taliban and Al-Qaeda and goat herders. The war in Afghanistan became America's longest-running, most expensive, and least binge-worthy series. Running 20 seasons from 2001 to 2021, it lasted longer than Friends, had fewer laughs than Breaking Bad, and despite a budget of over $2.3 trillion, still somehow ended on a worse note than Yellowstone. The numbers are staggering. Over 2,400 U.S. troops killed, over 20,000 wounded, and I knew many of them. Over 150,000 Afghans killed, and so much money was spent there. You could have paid off every credit card in America and all of the accumulated student loan debt in the country, but instead we spent it in Afghanistan. And what did we get for it? The Taliban, who we originally went to kick out, was back in charge before the last United States Air Force plane left the tarmac. Billions of dollars in U.S. military equipment left behind because apparently we're running an unintentional GoFundMe for insurgents. And a new generation of veterans with PTSD emerged. The VA is still handing out powerful barbiturate drugs instead of actual health care. It's a reminder that nation building is very expensive cosplay for politicians who don't actually have to do the fighting. So after 2 decades, thousands of lives, and enough money to turn every pothole in America into a luxury swimming pool, we got a grand total of zero democracy, negative stability, and a whole lot of burden for Americans. The U.S. played the longest, bloodiest, and most expensive game of capture the flag in history, and we still lost the flag. This much is clear. The failures of U.S. policy in Afghanistan are not the fault of the people who did the fighting. This was a war fought by deeply patriotic millennials, and it's shaped how millennials like myself look at war and foreign entanglement more broadly. Green Berets and combat controllers who call my Florida community home are some of the toughest and most hardened warriors you'll ever meet. Quiet, strong, deeply devoted to serving America. And I remember vividly the calls I got as a congressman from veterans from active duty who fought in Afghanistan. So many contemplated suicide, some even took their own lives. Green Berets would call me begging with cracked voices, crying as grown men, praying with me for any hope that the Afghans who helped them survive downrange would be rewarded with asylum in America. Congressman Gaetz, please help my interpreter. They'll kill him if they find him. He's the reason my kids get to hug their dad at night. Okay, I'd reply, what's his name? How can I prove his connection to your unit? I'll see what I could do. And then there would be a pause. He has 32 family members. He can't leave them. Can they all come? There's no question those who risk their lives to save my neighbors deserve all that America can reasonably give them. But 27, 32, 48 people in each of their families just become very difficult to vet. Are we certain that the stepbrother of every Afghan interpreter shares American values? I'm sure some do, but probably some don't. Several reports from U.S. government entities have identified deficiencies in the vetting process for Afghan evacuees admitted to the United States. The Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General issued a report in September of 2022. This report found that U.S. Customs and Border Protection lacked critical data to properly screen, vet, or inspect Afghan evacuees. Some of the evacuees were admitted or paroled into the United States without full vetting, posing potential risks for national security and community safety. That very Inspector General issued a follow-on subsequent report in June of 2024. It highlighted that DHS's technology and procedures and coordination were not fully effective in screening and vetting non-citizens, including Afghan evacuees. It emphasized that Customs and Border Protection could not access all of the federal data necessary to complete the screening and vetting, and that increased the risk of admitting individuals who could potentially pose a threat to security of our communities. Several Afghan evacuees have been charged with crimes in the United States. September 2021 at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, Baharullah Nouri was charged with attempting to engage in sexual acts with a minor, and Mohammed Haroun was charged with assaulting his spouse by strangulation. In August of 2022 in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Mohammed Atif Saeed, an Afghan refugee, was arrested and later convicted for the murder of 3 people. In October of 2024, Nasir Ahmad Tawali, an Afghan national who entered the United States under the Special Immigrant Visa Program, was charged with plotting an ISIS-inspired attack on Election Day. The question of vetting is highly relevant today as President Trump meets with King Abdullah of Jordan. Trump wants Jordan and Egypt to take hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of Gazan refugees. During a news conference today with the king, it was announced that Jordan would be taking 2,000 sick children from Gaza.
One of the things that we can do right away is take 2,000 children that are either cancer children or in a very ill state to Jordan as quickly as possible.
I didn't know that, what you just said, 2,000 children with cancer or other problems, and that's really a beautiful gesture.
It is a nice gesture and probably life-saving for those 2,000 children, but it's also telling to me that Jordan, a Muslim country adjacent to Gaza, didn't agree to take more than 2,000 people. What does this say about Jordan's own confidence in their ability to vet appropriately in the current dynamic? And what vetting lessons have we learned? Do we and other countries have sufficient confidence that anyone can vet a massive wave of desperate displaced people? And what happened to those who did help America and remain in Afghanistan or other countries? Do they have hope that there will be an ordered, safe way for them to escape the Taliban, even to this day? Joining us now is Navy veteran and president of AfghanEvac, Sean VanDiver. Sean, thanks so much for being here. Please share what your organization does, the goals, and what you see as the most pressing current challenge.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me on today, Matt. One thing in your monologue, it said that the guy that came in for the Oklahoma City, the guy that was charged in Oklahoma City, he didn't come here on an SIV.
Well,
he
please
came
correct
here
me.
as a parolee during the evacuation. And that's what the Inspector General reports were talking about, right? That they didn't appropriately vet those folks. They found a bunch of cases that they didn't appropriately vet, and the last administration kicked them out. They deported a bunch of these folks that were found to be security threats. Thank you for having us on. AfghanEvac is a bipartisan, nonpartisan organization that stood up during the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan to fill the gap that the President Biden's team couldn't fill. Right? We were talking to Afghan interpreters on the ground. We were coming together, pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps like only Americans can do, helping get interpreters and others through to navigate the streets of Kabul, get to the airport, get on planes, and get out.
So how many people do you think are stuck in Afghanistan now who were directly involved in supporting the U.S. mission and U.S. troops?
There are estimates somewhere from 100,000 to 200,000 people. Now, not all of those people will make it through vetting and get through, but those that do, people who can prove their ties to us, people like folks in the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program pathway and the SIV pathway, once they get through the various vetting checks and the various validation, they deserve to come here, and they've earned it by serving alongside my brothers and sisters in arms, by making sure that they fought for the idea of America, putting themselves at risk, putting their families at risk, and now the Taliban is hunting them down.
Yeah, have you heard circumstances where the people who were engaged in this work alongside America have received punishment or death at the hands of the Taliban?
We have. We've heard story after story after story of people who have been hung, people who have been hunted down, people who have been tortured and then released. In fact, we're going to get into a little bit later some of the impacts of some executive orders that have come out, but over the Christmas holiday, a family member of one of our active duty service members was killed. And that's just unconscionable.
Do you believe that was an act of retaliation in some kind?
I understand that
Okay.
it was.
So a lot of Americans who will watch this will say, well, gosh, we've seen these reports from the Inspector General saying that DHS may have admitted or paroled individuals in the United States who pose a risk to national security. And they'll wonder about another wave of 100,000 or 200,000 more. What would you say to folks that are concerned about the vetting process?
I would refer folks to the Heritage Foundation report that says that the refugee admissions program is safe, legal, secure immigration. I would refer folks that there hasn't been an incident where an SIV has done something to cause harm. And in cases where somebody has radicalized, like this Oklahoma City case, unfortunately, every population has bad apples. Every population has people that are jerks, right? And what you have to do with those people is you have to identify them, you have to isolate them, and you have to excise them. Nobody wants people that are going to cause harm, do violent crimes. Nobody wants folks like that here, but we can't wipe away the service of all these other folks. So in the case of this gentleman from, I call him gentleman, but obviously not a gentleman, this accused terrorist from Oklahoma City, he radicalized after he got here. He wouldn't have popped on any of the vetting, but he did come as a parolee, never went all the way through the SIV process. As soon as he radicalized, the FBI caught it. This is a case of the system working, which may be shocking to you. It's shocking to me, having worked with government.
Yeah, thank goodness there wasn't an ISIS-inspired attack on Election Day. But I think people look at any risk of that and wonder, what am I balancing against it? And I think there are some who I know in my community who would say, Matt, if you leave these people there to get slaughtered, on our next mission, how are we supposed to tell people whose advice that we need, that they ought to consider America a partner? Are you worried that where we currently sit could affect operational capability down the road?
I'm so worried about that. I'm so worried about our kids going downrange, because America is going to end up in another conflict, right? Whether we like it or not, we're going to end up in another conflict, be it China, Russia, or somebody else. We're going to end up in another conflict, and we need local forces who would support us, to trust our word that when we say, you stand with us, we'll stand with you, you can become an American because you're fighting on the side of America. Our promises can't be conditional and temporary.
How far should they reach, though? Because I understand when you've got someone who is directly involved with the mission, but when you get out to stepbrothers and stepsisters and cousins and uncles, I worry that somebody could have a loose affiliation with service to our country, but could hold contrary values. Is that a concern of yours?
It's not, because in the evacuation, there was a bunch of people trying to come through, like, orders of magnitude out from your nuclear family. But in this case, that's not happening anymore. SIVs and refugees that are coming in through the U.S. RAP P1, P2 program, they can't bring those second and third orders.
Okay, well, I know you're concerned about some of the executive orders that have been issued, and you wanted to make an appeal about that, so I definitely want to understand how you're seeing the practical applicability of some of President Trump's orders.
So President Trump, on the campaign trail, made the promise that he was going to take broad action on immigration. And we've seen it happening over the past several days, or the past several weeks, right? On day one, he signed 2 executive orders that impacted Afghans. One was the pause on U.S. refugee admissions program, and the other was the pause on foreign aid. The immediate impact of the U.S. RAP executive order was all refugees stopped. That's family of active duty U.S. service members. That's female tactical platoon commanders.
And how many family of active duty service members do you assess are caught in that situation?
There are 3,000 individual family members of 200 service members. 200 of those individual family members are stuck in Qatar right now, waiting to transit, and they can't move until the refugee pause is lifted.
And I mean, if God forbid somebody came up through this system and did harm to Americans, I mean, what would we say to the Americans that were the casualties of such an act of violence, or God forbid a terrorist attack?
I mean, it would be a horrific day, right? We've got to make sure that we do everything we can to stop that from happening. But Afghans aren't the only ones that do that, right? There's a lot of different people that anybody can.
Yeah, well, there were a lot of different people in Afghanistan fighting on all sides of this crazy war that we probably shouldn't have been in to the extent that we were. The systems in Afghanistan, that we're vetting against, I worry about, because they're run by the Taliban, and you know, it isn't exactly like they got a LinkedIn profile. You can go check on what their associations and affiliations are. And so what would you say to Americans that look at, and I don't even mean Afghanistan, but anywhere in the world where there's a country where there's not really a good database to give clarity as to someone's activities?
Sure. So that's another executive order that was signed. And what we're worried about is that exactly what you're saying is that Afghanistan might be shut down. But what I'll tell you is that we have 20 years of data from Afghanistan, and I'm sure we have more coming in now. I don't want to get into the specifics of what databases or who's doing what or what information they have, but I am confident that we have appropriate information on the people that are trying to come here, that Americans can rest easy that they are safe and secure with Afghans in our neighborhood, fighting our wars, making a difference in our community.
I'm glad you have that comfort, and I totally agree with the fundamental premise that if you leave people behind who have been helpful, you demoralize your own force and you demoralize your future prospects of partners. That is the core premise, and I agree with it. I would probably have more comfort if the people who were saying there wasn't good review, there wasn't coordination, we're saying, no, we've made some sort of generational progress between then and now. And until then, I appreciate that you're at least giving life to some of the concerns of these people who are caught in the middle. Sean VanDiver, thank you so much. And how can people follow your organization?
They can go to AfghanEvac.org. Go ahead and donate to us. We need your help. We need you to add your voice to our course, and check out our letter that we sent to Secretaries Hegseth, Noem, and Rubio, making the national security case for keeping this open.
Sean, thanks so much for being here. And